There's a question surrounding Jannik Sinner right now that almost nobody wanted to ask a year ago, back when he looked genuinely untouchable. Is the most disciplined player in men's tennis being managed toward greatness, or being quietly run into the ground by the very system built to protect him? At 23, Sinner should be standing at the absolute peak of his powers. World number 1. Back-to-back Wimbledon titles. A resume that reads like a player entering the most dominant stretch of his career. And yet, in the middle of a summer that should have been a coronation, his own body has started sending signals that his team can no longer ignore. A knee issue serious enough to force him out of Cincinnati, arriving just weeks after he lifted another Grand Slam trophy in seemingly perfect health. That timing matters. This isn't a player limping through a decline. This is a champion at his physical peak, surrounded by one of the most meticulous, science-driven coaching operations in the sport, suddenly breaking down in a way nobody fully predicted. So the uncomfortable question underneath all of this isn't really about one knee injury. It's about whether the exact system built to make Sinner the most efficient, most relentless competitor in tennis has quietly become the very thing pushing him past what his body can actually sustain. To understand how Sinner's team operates, you have to understand the philosophy that's defined his rise from the very beginning. Since parting ways with his early coaching setup and building a new team around Darren Cahill and Simone Vagnosi, Sinner's entire operation has been built on one core principle: eliminate waste. Waste in movement, waste in shot selection, waste in emotional energy spent on anything that doesn't directly improve results. That philosophy is precisely what turns Sinner into the most efficient ball striker in men's tennis. Fewer unforced errors than almost anyone on tour. A serve rebuilt for maximum reliability under pressure. A conditioning program designed to keep him physically sharp deep into best-of-5 matches, when most opponents start to fade. Every part of his game, every part of his schedule, engineered with the same relentless precision. And for a long stretch, it simply worked. He climbed to world number 1. He won back-to-back Wimbledon titles. He built a level of consistency that made him look less like an athlete having good and bad days, and more like a machine executing the same optimized process, match after match, tournament after tournament. But that same relentless optimization comes with a cost that rarely gets discussed until something actually breaks. A packed 2026 calendar, built around defending ranking points, chasing more majors, and maintaining sponsor and tour commitments that come with being the face of men's tennis, left almost no natural gaps for his body to fully reset. Wimbledon ended in mid-July. Cincinnati was supposed to follow within weeks. There was no real off-season buffer between the two. No extended recovery block. Just the next tournament on the calendar, and a team built to keep pushing toward it. Then the knee issue appeared. Not a dramatic, sudden injury from one bad step, but the kind of gradual breakdown that so often follows a body pushed continuously at peak output with minimal recovery in between. Sinner's own public explanation was calm and measured, working with his medical team since Wimbledon, deciding the knee needed real time rather than being managed through another tournament. But the timing tells its own story. A player engineered for maximum efficiency, suddenly needing his team to make the one decision that efficiency almost never allows: stop. So what does this actually mean for the rest of Sinner's 2026 season, and for how his team manages him going forward? In the short term, the calculation is relatively straightforward. Rest the knee properly now, arrive at the US Open genuinely healthy, and treat this as a manageable interruption rather than the start of something bigger. Sinner's own history suggests he's capable of that kind of quick reset. His conditioning has always allowed him to return from short breaks without losing significant sharpness. If that's all this turns out to be, the story quietly fades once he's back on court playing at his usual level. But the longer-term question is harder to dismiss so easily. If a system built entirely around eliminating waste and maximizing output has now produced a physical breakdown at the exact moment Sinner should be entering his athletic prime, that raises real questions about whether the current model is actually sustainable across an entire career, or whether it simply works until it doesn't. Efficiency, at its core, often means running as close to the edge of capacity as possible without going over. It's an incredibly effective strategy for maximizing short-term results. It's a genuinely risky one for a body that has to hold up for another decade of elite competition. There's also an uncomfortable incentive structure sitting underneath all of this that rarely gets discussed publicly. A coaching team's success is measured largely in results, rankings defended, titles won, tournaments deep run. Rest, recovery, and long-term physical preservation don't show up on a stat sheet the same way a Grand Slam title does. That doesn't mean Sinner's team is being reckless. Every indication so far suggests they responded appropriately once the knee issue became serious enough to require action. But it does mean the built-in pressure of elite tennis. More tournaments, more points to defend, more expectations attached to being world number one makes it genuinely difficult for any team, no matter how well-intentioned, to prioritize long-term health over short-term momentum until a body physically forces the issue. It's worth comparing this directly to how Alcaraz's camp has handled his own injury this year, where Alcaraz's team chose aggressive, months-long caution from the very first sign of trouble, sacrificing multiple tournaments including 2 Grand Slams. Sinner's operation appears to have pushed forward at full intensity, right up until his body made the decision for him. Neither approach is necessarily wrong, but they represent 2 very different philosophies for managing a young superstar's body through the most physically demanding years of their career. One built around early, proactive caution, the other built around relentless output until something eventually gives. So is discipline itself becoming Jannik Sinner's biggest vulnerability? It's a strange question to ask about the most controlled, most methodical player in men's tennis. A player whose entire identity has been built around never letting his emotions, or his effort, or his physical output waver from one match to the next. But that same relentless consistency may be precisely what left his team with less room to notice a warning sign before it became something that had to be addressed with an actual withdrawal. There's a version of this story where none of it matters in 6 months. Sinner rests properly, arrives in New York fully healthy, and this becomes nothing more than a brief, forgettable pause in a career that continues its historic trajectory largely uninterrupted. His body has proven remarkably resilient before, and there's no evidence yet that this knee issue represents anything close to a structural, career-altering problem. But there's another version worth taking seriously. One where this becomes the moment Sinner's team is forced to genuinely reconsider the model that got them here. Because a philosophy built entirely around eliminating waste, around running as efficiently as possible with almost no room left over, works exactly until a body finally reaches its limit. And when that limit arrives, it rarely announces itself gently. It shows up exactly like this: a knee that quietly built toward a breaking point, hidden underneath a schedule with no real space left to catch it earlier. At 23, with what should be at least another decade of elite tennis still ahead of him, Sinner's team now faces a genuinely difficult decision. Keep pushing the same relentless system that built a world number one and back-to-back Wimbledon titles, or start building in the kind of margin that protects a body over the long run, even if it occasionally costs momentum in the short term. Efficiency built the machine. The real question now is whether that same efficiency can be trusted to preserve it. The same discipline that built a champion can quietly become his biggest risk. If this gave you a new way of seeing Sinner's rise, hit subscribe. We tell the stories other channels skip.